I've been in the change business for about 32 years now, and consistently over that period of time, it's been clear that the rubber really hits the road, the action really happens at the municipal government and community level. We encourage and we support and we hope for leadership from provincial and federal governments. But on this particular file, on the environmental file in general, and on the climate change file, it was the 1988 Toronto Atmosphere Conference, in heavy involvement from municipalities, that really brought the science of climate change into the public and business arena. And ever since 1988, it has been constant and consistent leadership, municipal government sector in Canada that has shown fastest and most efficiently the delivery of real concrete results in action. So it's no surprise, but it's again encouraging to see the City of Calgary, among other municipalities, stepping up to the plate to show this level of leadership. We need to be containing the average warming globally to 2 degrees Celsius in order to avoid catastrophic climate change. So everything works backwards from there. That means containing the increase in greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere to, at best, a 550 part per million level. That's a doubling from pre-industrial levels. That means we have to stop the growth in greenhouse gas emissions by 220 at the latest. And it means we've got to eventually reduce our emissions by at least 80% of our 1990 levels by 2050. So what does that mean for us? What that means for us is we are moving very, very quickly towards a 90 to 95% reduction in our per capita emissions. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not tinkering at the edges. To eliminate 95% of our per capita emissions, our industrial share, our municipal share, our personal lifestyle share, we are talking major, significant, big change. So what does that look like in Canada? Well, if you spread our emissions out, that's just a basic bar chart. Most of our emissions are still in heavy industry, although we draw on that heavy industry for our electricity needs, for our fossil fuel transportation needs, and for those other industrial facilities, the left-hand side. The little blue bar in the middle of the right-hand side, that's our individual emissions from transportation. The little dark blue bar beside it that's our individual emissions from residential buildings. So we all have a job to do here, but a big part of this is going to have to come in Canada from our heavy industry emissions and our share of that, including our share from electricity, including our share from the economic benefits we get from the energy industry and other industries. We also have in a low carbon future some economic prosperity goals that are absolutely critical. We have to have in this province, in this city, a viable and hopefully a leading industry, an energy industry that will continue to provide jobs, that will continue to provide tax revenue and maybe royalty revenue from the supply of energy. But those are going to have to be low carbon energy sources, but as well from the supply of energy services and energy demand management technologies. So that's the economic need side we have. The other key economic prosperity goal affects our cost of living and our competitiveness. We have to have an affordable cost of living for us as individuals, and we have to have a competitive operating climate for our businesses. And that means our cost of food, our cost of energy, our cost of all those services, and our available lifestyle options have to be low carbon because it's going to cost a lot to emit carbon. Let's talk a bit now, as Jeff and Carrie asked me to, about innovation. Well, innovation requires motivation. What are the key motivation driving forces that are going to get us seriously innovating at the level we're talking about? First of all, we have the environmental issues picture. We have a lot of environmental issues out there, but without a doubt, the big one on the radar screen now that interacts with and accelerates all of the environmental issues and eclipses those other environmental issues is climate change. We're not talking climate change anymore. The language has changed because the science is real. We're talking catastrophic climate change. coming out of the March 12, 2009 Scientific Congress, basically summarized recent observations confirm, given the high rates of observed emissions, the worst case IPCC scenarios, trajectories, or even worse, are now being realized. And they go on to say there is a significant risk that many of these trends will accelerate, leading to an increasing risk of abrupt or irreversible climatic shifts. The problem that has not been in the models that is making this very, very serious now is a concept called runaway climate change or accelerating climate change. And it's based on a series of positive feedback loops that the models don't do a very good job, and that's why we're under-predicting the rate of climate change and the seriousness of climate change. And there's a list, you can see them there. It's everything from the rapid melting of the Arctic ice that removes albedo, to the release of methane as our permafrost melts down, which causes more gas to go up, to what is probably the big kicker, and that's ocean acidification and the inability of the ocean to continue to absorb the CO2 that it used to be able to absorb. So that's motivation. Here's another motivation piece for me. The consensus from the global environmental and more global scientific community is that in the ranking of OECD member countries and how they are being assessed on their climate action performance by the non-profit organizations, the unaligned, the scientific, the agencies. In 2007, Canada was third last in its global reputation for action on climate change. And the only folks falling behind Canada were Australia and the USA. Since 2007, Australia has made a rapid reversal of its position and is moving very, very aggressively on real hard action on the ground. And the United States, as a result of the new president and the new administration, has also taken a much stronger leadership role. Folks, we're running dead last. Dead last is not a great place to be as a country, and dead last is a lousy place to be in an economy where you're going to be penalized for running last. So that's a little bit of motivation to get our act together and get moving. Another key motivation area is the economic opportunity or risk equation. The low carbon energy, clean tech, green tech revolution is underway, and it's coming at us like a freight train. We have incredible leadership measured by dollars invested, walking the talk, action on the ground, programs that are moving, measurement of reduced emissions from the European community. Under the new US leadership, we saw $85 billion in the last stimulus package directly invested, moved into renewable energy and energy efficiency. Compared to Canada's stimulus investment to get us out of this deficit mess, on a per capita basis, the US is outspending us 8 to 12 to 1, between 8 and 12 to 1 per capita. That money, coupled with the investment by the American corporations, US private sector, moving into clean technology, green energy, is estimated to be as much as 15 to 1 on a per capita basis. When you spend money, when you motivate the Americans to do what they do well, they move really fast and they get the job done. Why is the US moving this way? It's worth taking a minute to reflect on that. In part, they're doing it because science has regained a legitimate role in US policymaking. That's good. But more importantly, it's happening in the United States because clean energy, green technology is now seen as the only way the Americans can do what they did better than they did it when they had the race for the moon. And that is drive their industry, drive their industrial innovative capacity to create something new that they can win at, that they can be good at, that they can lead economically at again. Because they're not going to do it on manufacturing, they're not going to do it competing against the Chinese and the Indians and folks like that on some of those traditional areas. It's also being done because the Americans have to stop the hemorrhaging of money out of the country to manage their balance of trade accounts and their deficits, and they want to stop funding petro-dictators who are underwriting terrorism. The Pentagon is a very strong supporter of this policy. And there's an emerging self-interested lobby in the United States that has come together. It's a marriage of the religious right that is now accepting green stewardship, with the new economy winners in electricity and batteries in New Tech, California, with the traditional environmental community, with the portion of the oil and gas industry that knows it can win in a race to low-carbon fossil fuels. Another motivation is international compliance. When we get talking about Kyoto, Copenhagen, all of those United Nations framework rules, we are doing one thing and one thing only. We are recognizing that the biggest limited resource we have in the world today is space in the atmosphere to assimilate and cycle carbon. Those conversations are about divvying up and dividing and allocating a scarce resource, space in the atmosphere for carbon. When you allocate that, you allocate each country a share. And that's basically what Kyoto did, that's what the Copenhagen Agreement will do. It will allocate a share of that global resource to Canada. In turn, Canada has to allocate shares of that available resource, that limited resource, to sectors of the economy, to cities, to provinces somehow. And that's what the whole game is about. What will it cost to do this? The estimates, the best estimates coming out of the international economic community that are advising global leaders is that we can get the job done for well less than a 1% reduction in the growth rate of the economy. The recent IPCC work that has been done has indicated that to achieve stabilization levels, we're going to probably be able to reduce the rate of growth in the economy by something in the 0.12% annual growth rate. It may cost net, but it's not going to cost a tenth of the reduction in global economic activity we've witnessed in the last year. There are 6 key things that we have to be doing, and now we're getting into your roadmap and your action on the ground in your communities and your private sector work and your government work. Number 1, we must achieve major gains in energy efficiency. Number 2, we must achieve big reductions in end-use demand for energy, and those are not the same thing. If we decide we need light today, we can deliver it with a very inefficient incandescent bulb, or we can produce it with a highly efficient LCD or compact fluorescent bulb. But do we need light at all? Can we put, as this wonderful facility has done, put natural windows and light in so we don't need electric lighting in the building? Then we have reduced the demand. If you drive an efficient vehicle or take public transit to work, you're using a more efficient technology. If you telecommute and work from home and don't need that energy at all, you reduce the demand for transporting yourself to work, you have reduced the end-use demand. 2 key strategies. Number 3, we need to achieve deep reductions in the carbon intensity of the remaining fossil fuel production and consumption. I have a beef with many of my environmental colleagues. Some of them are hung up on the idea that fossil fuels can't be part of a low-carbon future. And I say that's just ideology. Fossil fuels can be managed in a way that their carbon intensity can be dramatically lowered, and that allows them to be a part of a low-carbon future if we're smart about how we do it and if we set the goals and invest the resources. Whether fossil fuels are low carbon or high carbon purely depends on the technology innovation we throw at them. There is absolutely a significant role in the future, in my opinion. Number 4, it must though involve rapid penetration of renewable, low-carbon energy sources. This is not a choice between renewables and fossils. This is getting the most out of both of those components. Number 5, it requires the protection and enhancement of the carbon sinks that will absorb carbon out of the atmosphere and store it. Whether they are geological sinks or whether they are biomass sinks in soil or in trees, doesn't matter. The bottom line is, if it gets it out and holds it and stores it for a long period of time, it's a big part of the solution. And number 6, we have to diversify our economic development strategies so we're not just in the energy game, so we're also pursuing low-carbon products and services. All these components have to succeed big time, big way, in order to achieve that 95% range of reductions. So we got to stop wasting time saying one strategy is better than the other, one component isn't valuable, all 6 components are required. What are the conditions for success in innovation? Innovation, number 1, requires serious investment by both the public sector and the private sector. Now, if your governments are spending less than 1/10 or 1/12 of what your other OECD partner competitors are doing in the global economy, you're not going to be a leader. You can try hard, you can do your best, but good Lord, folks, we have to get a serious investment in R&D. We're at the bottom of the pack by almost everybody's measure. The energy industry itself doesn't have a great track record here either. In a country that has some of the lowest levels of our R&D investment, the Canadian energy industry has one of the lowest levels of any sector for reinvestment into R&D leading towards these sorts of things. There's a little bit there, but relative to the resources available, there has to be a big step up. Innovation also requires not just cash, but your best human resources. So I have a real simple test when I go in and work with a company or a city. Where is your innovation team? Who is directly responsible for innovation? Who's accountable? Where are your VPs of innovation? Show me where your best and brightest people are, and what else do they have on their radar screen in their job chart? And I can tell you in 10 minutes whether that company is serious about innovation and R&D or whether they're not by the quality of the people and their assignments and how much other clutter they have on their table. Until our energy industries put a serious component of their best people with enough time to chase innovation, they're not going to be leading in this field. And yet they have the best and the brightest right here in our province, in our energy industry. Are they going to continue to chase growth in capacity, or are we going to start chasing growth in quality and innovation? It's a choice, and we're so well positioned to do well at it if we choose correctly. Innovation requires an appetite for risk. You have to be prepared to make mistakes. You have to accept, as a venture capitalist does, as an entrepreneur does, I'm going to try 5 things. 3 of them are going to bust and fall down. 2 of them are going to do reasonably well. Of those 2, I'm going to try even harder. 1 of them is going to hit the home run, and that's where I'm going to get results. And I'm not going to be penalized for the 3 that fail or the 1 that has moderate results. If you don't try stuff, if you don't allow for failure, if you don't encourage taking risks, you will not get innovation. I know of what I speak because I've been spending the last 3 years hammering against the walls of folks who say they want change with some very promising innovative results, only to find that these barriers are much more significant than I had expected. Innovation requires the opportunity to have a rapid exchange of ideas, and I stress the word rapid. It's not good enough to talk back and forth or get information to somebody else once every 3 to 6 months. You need to be in a climate where the top ideas are percolating around and are incubated and supported rapidly. Innovation requires good antenna, staying plugged in so you know what else other people are up to. Innovation also requires a little bit of incentive, regulatory motivation. Everywhere on the clean environment file, the air issues file, the water file, the climate change file that we have seen results, it's where we have put a strong regulatory requirement. We cap levels of emissions. You can't operate unless you operate within these limits. We have intensity standards, we have efficiency standards. So it requires a regulatory driver. It also requires financial motivation. If you're serious about innovation, you need to ensure that you have some real, hard, fair financial motivation. And that financial motivation can include penalties and incentives. First and foremost, though, on the climate file and the low carbon file, financial motivation requires putting a real price on carbon. Innovation also helps if you identify and remove some of the barriers. Let me tell you about a few of the barriers that I have been astounded by in the last 5-6 years I've been working really seriously, mostly in the private sector now, on driving innovation. First of all, the financial incentives to grow big far outweigh the financial incentives to grow better. That is absolutely key to understand. Whether it's a big oil sands company that is rewarded for adding more capacity but continuing to run lousy, inefficient operations, or whether it's a city that is putting a planning program together and rewards developers for slapping large amounts of footprint down away from the center of the city and makes it difficult and expensive in terms of bottom line financial impacts on the developer to infill and do things better and more intensively in the center. Most cities still suffer from that perverse incentive. We also have a big barrier. We have an economic and a cultural fixation on quantitative growth as the raison d'etre for economic development, rather than qualitative improvement. And in the issue of carbon, we can't keep getting bigger. There is a cultural resistance to change in many of our large energy players and also in many of our big government players. We've got to overcome that cultural resistance to grab the basic boilerplate engineering that worked for the last 10 years, pull it off, stick it into the plan, because we know it works, it's worked for the last 10 years, and run with it. We have an incredible amount of ego and attitude inside some of the folks who have to make decisions to do something new. They've been doing it their way. They are the people who have been working on a big idea and they've got billions invested in moving it forward. And for a little company, a little entrepreneur with a new idea to come and get acceptance and a level playing field to try something new inside the big decision maker players is very, very difficult. So the big energy players, the big government players really need to understand how big a barrier that is and remove that cultural resistance and push the ego and attitude to the side to give the entrepreneurial ideas an opportunity to play. They're just going to go elsewhere to where there's more receptivity if you don't. And we also have the issue of administrative and bureaucratic suffocation, the amount of time and effort and energy that it takes to move good ideas forward. So those are real barriers. If you don't plan to remove them, you won't succeed. If you do plan to remove them, you can lead in the innovation game, but you need to be very, very honest about why good ideas are not going anywhere and address them and get them out of the way. As you start to chart your action plans, your strategies for innovating in your community, in your city, in your sphere of influence, number one, get the price signals right. If we don't get the price of carbon into the decision-making equations everywhere consistently, we won't make very good decisions. Economic price still drives most decisions. So if you want to drive low-carbon future, price carbon properly into your decision-making process. Require innovation, don't hope for it. If you don't require innovation from your industry leaders, from your government leaders, from your policy expectations, from your politicians, if they don't require it of the players they influence, you won't get it. And get serious. As I said, the race is on. We're falling behind. However, this city, this province is so well equipped to win in this race if we simply think big and if we get rid of some of these barriers. Take advantage of the municipal leadership, take advantage of the community leadership, take advantage of the small-scale capacity where people talk in the hallways, where people make decisions quickly. At the municipal level, a good idea can get from the community to a councillor or a mayor to the civil servants and back out very, very fast. That's a big advantage you have to move things at this level. And measure and report the right stuff. If we're saying we want a low-carbon future, but we continue to report back to the public on our performance on the basis of a bunch of other measures, then we're not really linking our reward, our reporting story, our performance accountability to the right stuff. So measure the right stuff and report the right stuff. And finally, commit and don't quit till it happens. Thank you. I hope you have a really productive next couple of hours and rest of the day. And I just want to close by again stressing how incredibly thankful I am and how lucky we are to have the municipal leadership that we're seeing coming out of municipalities in Canada on this file. And in particular, the City of Calgary has been one of those leaders. So good job, folks.